Her ex came to save her from a mistake. Instead, he walked straight into the moment Claire stopped pretending not to care. This is an original story. Any resemblance to real people, places, or events is purely coincidental. Claire drove back to the city with the kind of silence that was not empty. It had structure, intent. The sort of silence that sat upright in a charcoal suit and kept both hands lightly on the wheel while privately planning the downfall of at least one man. Iris noticed it immediately. Of course she did. She sat in the passenger seat with one heel kicked off, one leg folded under her, staring out the window at the road unspooling beneath a pale afternoon sky, and finally said, "You're doing that thing." Claire kept her eyes on the road. What thing? The quiet one. That narrows it down very little. The very elegant, very controlled quiet one where I can practically hear you editing someone out of existence. Claire's mouth moved, just slightly. That's dramatic. So is your face. My face is driving. No, Iris said, turning to look at her properly now. Your face is imagining murder in excellent lighting. That got Claire to glance over at last. Only for a second. But the look was enough. Come yes. Mild yes. Also unmistakably sharpened by the name Daniel still sitting between them like an unwelcome guest. Iris sighed and leaned her head back against the seat. You know, she said, for someone who claims not to be smug, you get very interesting when you're jealous. Claire's brows lifted. Jealous? Oh please. I'm not jealous. You're absolutely jealous. Claire signaled and changed lanes with painful correctness. A man is standing in your gallery after being encouraged there by people who would apparently like you restored to some previous version of your life. That does not automatically make me jealous. Iris folded her arms. Claire exhaled through her nose. It makes me annoyed. Possessive. Annoyed. Threatened. Claire gave her a look. It was a very good look. A rich, steady, devastatingly composed look that said three things at once. No, absolutely not. Be careful. Iris, being Iris, smiled. There she is, she murmured. Claire's fingers tightened just slightly on the wheel. I'm not threatened by your ex-boyfriend. Iris let that sit for one beat. Then said, no. You're offended by him. That actually made Claire laugh. Short. Quiet. Real. Yes, Claire admitted. That's closer. Iris felt weirdly pleased with herself for drawing it out of her. You could have just said that. Claire turned onto the avenue leading back toward the gallery district. I'm still deciding whether he's a fool, a nuisance, or a project. That is not comforting. It wasn't meant to be. Iris watched her for another second. Then looked back out the window and said, almost casually, Daniel isn't dangerous. Claire did not respond immediately. That meant she was paying attention. Which somehow made the next part harder to say. He's not a monster, Iris went on. He's just very convinced he knows what my life should look like. Claire's voice stayed even. And what should it look like? Iris snorted. Apparently not like this. Claire glanced at the ring on Iris's hand before returning her eyes to the road. A tragic oversight on his part. That got a laugh out of Iris. See, she said. There you are again. Where? Funny just often enough to destabilize people. Claire's mouth curved. It's efficient. Iris looked down at her own ring. Then at Claire's hand on the wheel. Then, because she could not seem to stop making choices that complicated her life, she asked, Do you want the truth? Claire's answer came instantly. Always. Iris traced the edge of her seatbelt with one finger. Daniel was easy. Claire's expression didn't change much, but Iris felt the attention sharpen. Easy how? Safe, Iris said. Expected. My parents loved him because he looked like stability. He had a plan for everything by the third date. A house eventually. Children eventually. Holidays where everyone wore the right clothes and talked about mortgage rates like that was emotional intimacy. Claire was quiet. Iris laughed once without humor. He liked me. Just not in a way that left much room for me. The silence in the car softened. Not lighter. Softer. And you left, Claire said. Yes. Because he wanted a version of you that was easier to display? Iris turned to look at her. Claire kept driving like she had not just said something irritatingly accurate. Wow, Iris said. That was annoyingly perceptive. Claire's mouth moved. I'm talented. You're unbearable. I've heard that. Iris watched the city thicken around them again. traffic lights blurring briefly against the windshield. Then she said, quieter now. For the record, if Daniel thinks he's rescuing me, he's about to embarrass himself. Claire's gaze stayed forward. Good, she said. There was something in that one word. Low, pleased, dangerous enough to make Iris's pulse jump. She crossed one leg over the other. You really are jealous. Claire turned into the gallery street and slowed the car. Then, very calmly, Iris. Yes, if you continue sounding this pleased by the idea, I may become less elegant about it. Iris stared, then smiled slowly. Well, she said, that's the most promising thing you've told me all day. Claire parked in front of the gallery and cut the engine. For one beat, neither moved. The sign on the window looked innocent enough. Inside, through the glass, Iris could see June near the desk, arms folded. And Daniel. Tall, clean-cut, expensive in a more obvious way than Claire, dark hair carefully styled, navy coat, the confident stance of a man who had never once mistaken being tolerated for being right. He was saying something. June looked one sentence away from violence. Iris made a face. Oh, I already hate his posture. Claire looked through the window too. Then, with no visible emotion at all, she unbuckled her seatbelt. I understand, she said. Iris reached for the door. Claire caught her hand first. Not hard. Not enough to stop her. Just enough to turn Iris's attention back. The look Claire gave her then was steady and unblinking and very, very clear. I'll follow your lead, Claire said. Unless he touches you. Iris held her gaze. Something warm slid low through her body, which was an extremely inconvenient response to have in front of her own gallery. Claire. Claire's thumb moved once over Iris's knuckles. Unless he touches you, she repeated. Iris swallowed. Then said, because she was impossible, and if he does? Claire's mouth softened in a way that was almost a smile and not comforting at all. Then I stopped being patient. Well, that was excellent. Iris opened the car door before she could do something humiliating like kiss her wife in broad daylight in front of the building. Inside, the bell above the gallery door chimed. June looked up first. The relief on her face was instant, vivid, and quickly replaced by the expression of a woman who had been containing herself for too long and now wanted applause. Oh, thank God, she said. One more minute and I was going to start charging him rent. Daniel turned. For one stupid split second, Iris saw the old version of things. His easy smile. The confidence. The familiarity. The assumption that she would soften when she saw him. Then he noticed the ring. Then Claire. And all of it shifted. Iris, he said. He said her name like he still had rights to it. Iris immediately hated the sound. Daniel. He took one step toward her, then seemed to register Claire more fully. And you must be Claire. Claire stood just to Iris's side. Coat still on, posture easy, face perfectly composed. Yes, she said. Nothing more. Daniel gave a small nod that tried very hard to suggest civility and landed somewhere nearer professional condescension. Daniel Mercer. Claire's expression did not change. So I gathered. June made a choking sound that was almost certainly a disguised laugh. Daniel ignored her. He looked at Iris again. Can we talk? We're talking now. In private. No. That stopped him. Good. Iris set her bag on the desk and took off her coat, handing it absently to June without taking her eyes off Daniel. You don't get to appear in my gallery acting like a concerned husband in a small-town drama. His jaw tightened. I'm not acting. No, Iris said. That's the problem. Daniel glanced at Claire once more. I heard what happened. Clearly. I also heard you were drunk. June turned away abruptly and pretended to be organizing postcards, which was how Iris knew she was listening with the full force of her soul. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice as if intimacy could still be manufactured by volume. Iris, come on. This isn't you. And there it was. The sentence. The one she had always hated. Not because it was cruel. Because it was smug. Because it came from a man who had always believed he knew her better than she knew herself. Iris folded her arms. You know what's interesting? Daniel blinked. What? This. She made a small circle in the air between them. You walking in here convinced you're the reasonable one. That I just need enough time and enough concern and I'll suddenly return to a version of my life that was more convenient for everyone. Daniel looked briefly stung. Then patient. That patience irritated her more. I'm trying to help you. I know. He lifted one hand. Then maybe let me. No. He took another step. Claire did not move. But the room changed anyway. Daniel looked at Iris's ring again. This can't possibly be what you want. Iris smiled. Not nicely. Do you know what my favorite part of this conversation is? He hesitated. You still think you're in it because I invited you. June bent at the waist over the desk, shaking silently with what was either horror or delight. Daniel's expression hardened at last. There. Better. More honest. Your parents are worried. My parents, Iris said, need hobbies. They asked me to check on you. Ah. There it was. The missing thread. Iris's mouth flattened. Of course they did. Daniel looked at her like that proved something. Because this is impulsive, irrational, and not remotely like the future you said you wanted. Claire's gaze shifted, finally, from him to Iris. Still letting her lead. Still waiting. That might have been the worst part. How attractive her restraint was. How much more powerful it made her feel. Iris took one slow breath. The future I wanted when? Daniel frowned. What? When I was still dating a man who heard every uncertainty I had and turned it into a floor plan. The silence that followed was deeply satisfying. Daniel tried again. That's not fair. No, Iris said. Showing up in my gallery because my parents are nostalgic for heterosexuality is not fair. June made a tiny involuntary noise that sounded suspiciously like reverence. And if you enjoyed jealous wives, terrible ex-boyfriends, and public scenes inside aesthetically pleasing buildings, subscribe now. Because Daniel Mercer had picked exactly the wrong afternoon to mistake Iris Quinn for a woman waiting to be rescued. Daniel looked at Claire then. A mistake. A major mistake. Because now there was no way around it. He was going to do what men like him always did when a woman's refusal became inconvenient. He was going to reframe the other woman. Claire met his gaze with effortless calm. Daniel gave her a thin, polite smile. I'm sure this is entertaining for you. June stopped pretending to work. Iris went still. Claire's voice remained level. I'm sure you'd like it to be. Daniel spread his hands slightly. Look, no offense, but people do impulsive things for all kinds of reasons. Rebellion. Attention. Pressure. Sometimes rich people get bored. June's eyes widened. Iris's hand tightened around the edge of the desk. Claire, however, only tilted her head. Do they? Daniel's confidence returned by half an inch. Enough to be fatal. You barely know her. Claire let that line breathe in the room for one beat. Then said, and yet I seem to know her better than the man who came here because her parents missed the idea of him. June actually had to turn away. Daniel's jaw set hard. I'm trying to spare her a mess. Claire's expression stayed almost serenely bored now. You are the mess. That one landed perfectly. Even Iris had to look down for a second so she wouldn't visibly enjoy it too much. Daniel's attention snapped back to Iris. Are you really going to let her talk to me like that? Claire's eyes changed. Tiny shift. Huge consequence. Iris saw it and answered before Claire could. No, she said softly. Daniel blinked. Then Iris lifted her head and gave him a bright, dangerous smile. I'm going to enjoy it. June let out a broken little sound and covered it with a cough that fooled absolutely no one. Daniel looked from Iris to Claire and back again, finally forced to reckon with the shape of the room. Not one woman misled by another. Not one impulsive mistake being gently corrected by masculine reason. Two women standing on the same side of the problem. He did not like that. Good. His tone cooled. You're making a spectacle of yourself. Iris's brows lifted. In my own gallery? Brave accusation. I'm serious. So am I. He looked at Claire's ring, then Iris's. How long do you think this lasts? Claire answered this time. As long as it does. Daniel gave a humorless laugh. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're entitled to. He looked at Iris again. You don't have to do this. The sentence hung there. Clumsy. Late. Familiar in all the wrong ways. Iris had heard versions of it before. You don't have to work that hard. You don't have to be so difficult. You don't have to make everything more complicated than it needs to be. And beneath all of them, always, the same hidden proposal. You don't have to be fully yourself if it would be easier for someone else. She stepped closer. Not aggressive. Just sure. No, Daniel, Iris said. I don't have to do this. That's what's bothering you. He stared at her. She went on, voice quiet now, cutting cleaner for it. I chose this. I chose her. Maybe recklessly, maybe too fast, maybe in a way that would give several adults high blood pressure. But I chose it. You don't get to walk in here and act like I tripped. For the first time since they arrived, Daniel looked genuinely lost. Not wounded enough for sympathy. Just disoriented by the fact that the script had failed him. Then, as men like him sometimes do when charm, concern, and condescension all collapse at once, he made one last bad decision. He reached for her arm. It was not violent. It was not dramatic. It was worse. Familiar. Presumptive. As if all this distance was temporary, and he could still bridge it by simply deciding to. Claire moved before Iris fully processed it. One smooth step. One elegant interception. Her hand closed around Daniel's wrist and removed it from Iris with terrifying calm. Not rough. Not hesitant. Absolute. Daniel went still. June stopped breathing altogether. Claire's voice was so quiet the whole room had to lean toward it. I did warn you about my patience. Daniel looked at her hand on his wrist. Then up at her face. And perhaps, finally, truly saw her. Not the tailored suit. Not the money. Not the amusement. The steel. Slowly, Claire let him go. Daniel straightened his sleeve as if that might restore some kind of dignity. It did not. His face hardened properly now. This is insane. Claire nodded once. Yes. Iris crossed her arms. And yet here you are. Daniel looked at her for one long second, his pride visibly arguing with the remains of his judgment. Then he took a step back. You'll regret this. That might have been ominous from someone else. From Daniel, it was just disappointing. Iris tilted her head. Please don't start sounding like a rejected campaign speech. June had to walk away at that point. Fully walk away. Because she was laughing too hard to remain professional. Daniel gave Iris a final look, then Claire, then turned and left without another word. The bell over the gallery door chimed once. And then he was gone. The room remained still for one long beat. 2. 3. Then June turned around, hands flat on the desk, eyes shining with vulgar delight. I need everyone here to know, she said, that I am experiencing a level of satisfaction usually reserved for tax refunds and enemy divorces. Iris put both hands over her face. Claire, incredibly, laughed. June pointed at Claire. Also that wrist move? Disturbing. Elegant. Disturbingly elegant. Claire looked almost modest. He was out of line. Yes, June said. And you looked like a woman who could have him quietly removed from the city. Iris lowered her hands and glared at both of them. Can we not make this worse? June blinked. Worse? Iris. Your wife just dismantled your ex in a gallery full of textured lighting. Claire's gaze shifted to Iris. There it was again. That little flare in her eyes whenever June said wife in a way that emphasized it. Iris noticed. Which irritated her for reasons that had very little to do with irritation. June pointed between them. Also for the record, the chemistry in here is now a workplace hazard. I'm so glad this is fun for you, Iris muttered. It is, June said brightly. Thank you. Claire looked around the room. Do you need to close early? Iris blinked. What? Claire glanced toward the windows. You look overstimulated. June nodded immediately. She does. Iris turned. Why are you both suddenly a committee? Because, June said, you just fought off your ex, your wife nearly committed an elegant felony, and I'm fairly sure if another human being walks in here wanting to discuss framing, you'll bite them. Iris opened her mouth. Then shut it. Because that was, annoyingly, not inaccurate. Claire's gaze stayed on her. Come home. The words were simple. Soft. And somehow more dangerous than any possessive line could have been. Iris hated how fast her body responded to them. She lifted her chin. That sounded suspiciously like an order. Claire's expression did not help. Did it? June physically turned away and pressed both hands to her mouth. June, Iris snapped. I'm silent, June lied. Iris looked back at Claire, then at the door, then at her own desk, and realized she wanted exactly one thing at that moment. To be nowhere in the world except somewhere private with Claire Donovan. Well, That was alarming. She grabbed her bag. Fine. June straightened instantly. Excellent. I'm locking the door behind you and lying to anyone who asks questions. Iris sighed. Please don't phrase it like that. I'll phrase it however I want. Go. Claire picked up Iris's coat before Iris could. Again with that maddening, old-fashioned ease. Again with the little gestures that had no right to matter as much as they did. On the sidewalk outside, the city felt too bright. Too public. Too ordinary for the way Iris's pulse was behaving. Claire stopped beside the car and opened the passenger door. Iris didn't get in. Claire looked across the roof. What? Iris folded her arms. You were jealous. Claire's mouth flattened, which on her counted as dramatic. We've discussed this. Not enough. Iris. No, I want to hear it. Claire glanced once up and down the street. This is neither the time nor the place. Exactly why it's interesting. Claire let out one controlled breath and came around the car instead, closing the distance between them. Now they stood on the sidewalk, too close, the late afternoon traffic moving around them. The gallery window reflecting both of them back like a piece of evidence. Claire looked down at her. Iris looked up. Neither moved. Then Claire said, very quietly, You enjoy this far too much. Iris's smile was slow. Yes. Claire's eyes dropped to her mouth. Then back up. That man walked into your space, Claire said. He spoke to you like you were confused. He reached for you like he had a right to. Her voice stayed low, almost conversational, which only made it worse. So yes, I was jealous. There. Out in the air. Sharp and clean and impossible to misunderstand. Iris swallowed. Good, she whispered. Claire's brow lifted. Good. Yes. Why? Iris stepped a little closer. Because apparently chaos had become her native language. Because, she said softly, you're very pretty when you stop pretending not to feel things. Claire stared at her, then gave a short, disbelieving laugh. You are a menace. I own a gallery. That is not a defense. It's an explanation. Claire opened the passenger door again. Get in the car. Iris tilted her head. Or, Claire looked at her for one dangerous second too long, then said with terrifying calm, or I kiss you on the sidewalk and ruin both our remaining patience. That did it. Iris got in the car. Immediately. The drive back was not quiet this time. It was worse. Too aware. Too charged. Every red light lasted too long. Every turn felt deliberate. The city outside blurred past in grays and golds while inside the car the air had gone close and electrically thin. Iris rested her elbow against the window and said, because apparently she had learned nothing, You grabbed his wrist like you were selecting a wine. Claire kept driving. That's a bizarre comparison. It's accurate. It was efficient. It was hot. Claire's grip tightened on the steering wheel. That was all. Just enough. Iris stared out the window to hide her smile. By the time they got back to the apartment, she was no longer sure whether she wanted to argue with Claire, kiss Claire, or make several poor decisions in expensive rooms. Maybe all three. Claire shut the apartment door behind them. The sound echoed softly through the entryway. Neither woman moved deeper into the apartment immediately. Shoes still on. Coats not fully off. Bags hanging from one shoulder. Iris turned first. Claire was watching her. No smile now. No polished humor. Just attention. Steady and bright and unmistakably sharpened by the afternoon. Iris set her bag down slowly. So, she said. So Claire replied. That was a lot. Yes. You were territorial. Claire did not deny it. Yes. Iris crossed her arms. I'm not something you get to win in guard. The second the words left her mouth, she felt the shift. Not anger. Not exactly. But Claire straightened in that subtle way she had before a difficult sentence. I know that, Claire said. Do you? Claire took off her watch and placed it very carefully on the console by the door. Yes. Iris's pulse was faster now. Because from where I was standing, you looked very comfortable acting like I belonged to you. Claire took one step closer. Then another. Not enough to crowd. Enough to make leaving the entryway feel suddenly theoretical. You stood there while he treated your marriage like a mistake, Claire said quietly. You stood there while he talked about you like he knew you better than you know yourself. You ended it. You were magnificent. And then he touched you. Iris held still. Claire's voice lowered further. So if I looked comfortable removing his hand from you, that's because I was. Something hot flashed through Iris. Anger, attraction, adrenaline, pride, all tangled together. She lifted her chin. You don't get to decide what happens to me. Claire's eyes sharpened. No. I get to decide what happens to him when he assumes. Silence. A dangerous one. Iris knew what she should do. She should de-escalate. She should breathe. She should step back from the woman in front of her before the entire apartment caught fire from unresolved marital tension. Instead, because she was still full of gallery light in Daniel's stupid face and Claire's hand on his wrist and that devastatingly calm yes, I was jealous, she said the most reckless possible thing. What? Iris asked softly. Worried he remembered how to kiss me? The stillness that followed was absolute. Claire's face changed. Not wildly. Not dramatically. Just enough. Enough to erase the last trace of amusement. Enough to leave only focus. Oh, Claire said. Very quiet. Iris's pulse jumped. That one syllable should have warned her. It did. She ignored it. Because then Claire stepped in, one hand bracing beside Iris's shoulder against the wall, the other settling firmly at her waist, and the look in her eyes was no longer polished enough to hide anything at all. Iris. Too late, Iris understood she had pushed exactly the right button and might not survive being pleased about it. Still, she made herself say, yes. Claire's jaw tightened once. Then. Enough. The word landed low and hard between them. Iris forgot how to breathe for half a second. Claire leaned in, close enough that her next words touched skin before they reached air. You're mine. Every thought in Iris's head scattered. Not because it sounded like ownership. Because it sounded like claim. Like certainty. Like the first truly unguarded thing Claire had said all day. Iris's hands found Claire's lapels on instinct. Claire. But Claire kissed her before the sentence could become anything safer. Not polite. Not careful. The kind of kiss that answered an argument by ending it. Iris gasped against her mouth, and Claire took full advantage of it, one hand sliding from her waist to the small of her back, bringing her in close enough that the line of Claire's body made the entire afternoon suddenly feel like foreplay. Iris kissed back just as hard. Of course she did. She was furious. Relieved. Turned on. Still half angry. Wildly, inconveniently happy that Claire had finally stopped pretending her feelings were made of marble. Claire's hand tightened. Iris's fingers tangled in shoulder-length brown hair and ruined whatever order remained in it. Claire made a low sound, more felt than heard, and pressed her more firmly against the wall. The apartment disappeared. There was only this. Heat. Breath. The sharp edge of the entryway console at Iris's hip. Claire's mouth on hers like a vow getting rewritten in real time. When Claire finally pulled back just enough to look at her, both of them were breathing too hard. Iris's lips parted. Claire's gaze dropped to them. Then rose again. Still that look. Still all that terrible, beautiful focus. You do not, Claire said, voice low and unsteady in a way that felt like a private miracle, get to say things like that and expect me to stay composed. Iris swallowed. The corner of her mouth lifted despite everything. You were doing so well. Claire's hand slid up the side of her throat, not gripping, just holding her there in a way that made Iris's knees feel aggressively theoretical. Iris. Yes. Be quiet. Iris laughed once. That was a mistake too. Because Claire kissed her again, harder this time, and the laugh vanished into something warmer, softer, more dangerous. They half stumbled from the entryway into the living room without fully separating. A heel hit the rug and nearly took Iris out. Claire caught her by the hips and kissed her again as though balance itself were negotiable. A jacket landed somewhere. Then a blouse button came undone under impatient fingers. Then another. And when Claire drew back just enough to look at her wife, hair loosened, lips flushed, green eyes bright with temper and want and terrible ideas. The expression on Claire's face was so openly affected that Iris's breath caught all over again. That pleased Claire. Obviously. It only got worse from there. Claire's thumb brushed once over the side of Iris's mouth. Then she said, quieter now, with all the command in her voice turned intimate instead of sharp. Bedroom. Iris should have said something defiant. Naturally. What came out instead was, bossy. Claire's mouth curved just slightly. Yes. And that was somehow the last coherent part of the evening. Because after that, it became kisses against walls and half-finished arguments dissolving into hands and heat and the terrifying realization that jealousy, apparently, looked very good on Claire Donovan. By the time they reached the bedroom, Iris's blazer was gone, Claire's hair was completely ruined, and both of them had crossed far beyond the point where sarcasm counted as a meaningful defense. Claire caught Iris by the waist at the edge of the bed and kissed her again, slower for 1 second, almost tender, just enough to make the intensity worse. Iris touched her face, her throat, the line of her shoulder, and Claire closed her eyes for one dangerous beat before opening them again. Still focused. Still there. Still so clearly in this that it made Iris's entire chest ache. Claire pressed her forehead lightly to Iris's and exhaled once. Tell me to stop. Iris stared at her. All that control. All that certainty. And still this. Still the question. Still the choice. Iris's hand slid to the front of Claire's blouse and curled there. If you stop now, she whispered, I'll hold it against you for years. Claire actually laughed. Just once. Soft and wrecked around the edges. Then she kissed Iris again, and the city beyond the windows blurred into light while the rest of the night belonged only to them. The next morning began later than usual. Much later. Sunlight was already bright across the sheets when Iris woke, warm and drowsy and very aware of 2 things immediately. 1, she was tangled in Claire. And 2, Claire was awake. She knew because Claire's fingers were moving lazily over the inside of her wrist where her hand rested against the pillow. Not idly. Thoughtfully. Like she had been awake long enough to observe. Iris kept her eyes closed 1 extra second on purpose. Then said, voice rough with sleep, that's unsettling. Claire's laugh came quiet against her hair. Good morning. Iris opened 1 eye. Claire was lying on her side facing her, shoulder-length brown hair loose and slightly messy, 1 arm under the pillow, the sheet low at her waist, face softer in the morning than at any other hour. It should have been illegal to look that composed after the night they'd had. Iris frowned at her. You look irritatingly pleased with yourself. Claire's brows lifted. Only irritatingly? Don't push it. Claire's hand slid from Iris's wrist to her waist and stayed there. Warm. Possessive in a much quieter way now. No anger left in it. Just familiarity. That was somehow more dangerous. Iris looked at her for a long second. Then said, because the line had been haunting her since the entryway. That thing you said. Claire's expression did not change much. Which told Iris she knew exactly which thing. Enough, you're mine? Claire asked. There went Iris's pulse again. Yes. Claire studied her face. Was that a problem? Iris looked down once, then back up. It should have been. Claire's mouth softened. But it wasn't, Iris admitted. Very quiet. Claire shifted closer by an inch. Good, she said. Iris narrowed her eyes. Don't look so smug. I'm not smug. You're morning smug. That isn't a real category. It is in this bed. Claire smiled then, small, unguarded, devastating in the sunlight, and brushed a curl back from Iris's face. Then I accept the diagnosis. For a while neither of them moved. The city hummed far below the windows. The sheets were a disaster. The room looked like the aftermath of either romance or highly successful arson. Iris should have felt panic. Should have felt the weight of the contract, the families, the ex-boyfriend, the speed of all this. Instead, she felt something worse. Peace. Small. Bright. Completely unreasonable. Claire's thumb moved once along her side. What are you thinking? Iris stared at her. Then told the truth because apparently she had stopped protecting herself properly around this woman. I'm thinking that my ex-boyfriend came to save me from my marriage and somehow made it significantly more married. Claire laughed. Really laughed this time, warm and helpless enough to make Iris grin against her will. That, Claire said, is an excellent summary. Iris shifted closer until their foreheads touched. Good. Claire's eyes dipped to her mouth. Dangerous word, she murmured. I know. And if you want part 5, the fallout, the final choice, the family pressure, the public test, and the moment Claire and Iris decide whether this impossible marriage was ever a gamble at all, subscribe. Because after Daniel, nothing between them was accidental anymore.